This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Jordan Butler, host of Head Over Heels, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Head Over Heels, where we talk about everything the Miss America organization. A new show comes out bi-monthly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Head Over Heels. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to How to Write Good. I'm your host, Daniel Poppie. Follow me at danielpoppie.com. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. Poppie is spelled P-O-P-P-I-E. If you can't spell Daniel, that's your problem. Someday, I'm going to tell you the information that will allow you to always be able to spell Daniel correctly and Michael correctly, but not today. If you enjoy How to Write Good, follow it on Facebook. And if you enjoy it, follow Public House Media on Facebook, because Public House Media makes this show possible. Check them out on Facebook. Check them out on thephmedia.com. And even if you don't like this podcast, maybe you stumbled into it and you're like, what is this guy doing? He doesn't know what he's talking about. I really don't like what he's, I don't like his viewpoints. I think that he's an idiot. You can also check out the other podcasts that Public House Media has, because they have other podcasts that are likely a lot better than this one. There's a 99% chance that their other podcasts are probably better than this one. You never know, though. Maybe you enjoy this. Maybe you enjoy pain in your life, and that's your prerogative, I suppose. Happy Thanksgiving for you in the United States. I do not bid a happy Thanksgiving to Canadians because I don't like Canadians. I lived with 2 Canadians. I didn't like them. They're not fun people. They're weird. And they talk funny. The word of the week is gelid, and gelid is spelled G-E-L-I-D. It's spelled with a G at the beginning, not with a J. And it means bitterly cold. And I did not realize as I was choosing this word that it was a kind of a coincidence. It was cold out today. I live in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is getting to be winter weather. It's where it starts, like the snow falls, and it's like living in a frozen hell. That's essentially what Wisconsin in the winter is like. Wisconsin is a beautiful state. I'm sure I know there's other states that are more beautiful, like if you go in the mountains or other areas like that. But Wisconsin is kind of like, to me, in some ways, it's like being in the Shire. It's kind of like that feel, because it's still more rural than most like in other parts of the country, but it's not super rugged. It's like rolling hills. So if you don't live in Wisconsin, check it out, because I think you'll probably enjoy it, especially if you get out of the cities. So yeah, it's getting cold here, and I just happen to be like, oh, I like this word. I'll have this on my podcast this week. So this word is actually related to gelatin, because gelatin, when you cool it down, it gets hard. So there you go. Again, the word is gelid. It means bitterly cold. You can also use it to describe character traits. All right, so we have our word of the week. We have added another vocabulary word. We've added another word to our lexicon of words. Look at that word right there. I used a big word. That means I'm smart. We've added another word to our lexicon. We are reaching toward genius right here on How to Write Good. But we are going to jump right into our accidental essence, and now we are going to plunge into the depths of idiocy as we talk about our question of the week. So our question of the week, and by our question, I mean my question of the week, because you're not discussing this question. You're not on this show. Give me a break. My question of the week that I am presenting myself, it sounds like I have split personality disorder. I'm presenting the question, what makes you a writer? And the reason why I'm presenting this is because one of the reasons I made this podcast is because of questions like this and responses that writers give to this question, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me first jump into what other writers say about what makes you a writer. So there are a lot of things that writers say, and in my opinion, when you say, oh, this is what something is, you should be really concise as possible, because it's kind of like that old, it's probably an overused phrase, if it's everything, it's nothing. So if writing is everything, writing is really nothing. If the word writer, if you say, oh, this person's a writer, and there's tons and tons of things that define what a writer is, then it really means nothing. There are certainly cases where I guess that doesn't apply. It's probably faulty logic in a lot of areas. Since we go through the logical fallacy of the week, we'll probably find a fallacy that actually covers that, and I'll be like, oh, I guess I've been using fallacies for years. This fallacy for years, but if you have too much stuff underneath the definition of something, eventually you're like, what are you even talking about anymore? And that's kind of what I'm saying. And there's more to this, but I keep on getting ahead of myself. My brain's way at the other end of this discussion. I need to start at the beginning. So some things that writers say, some people that write, people who are writers, whatever, say is that you must write every day, or you don't just write now and then. You must understand writing on a deeper level. So you understand the craft of writing. One thing that seemed to be prevalent is that they said that you needed a compulsion for writing. It wasn't just something to put down your thoughts. It was a compulsion. It was a compulsion. It was like the air you breathe. Writing was as important as the air you breathe. So that's another thing. Another one was this one I really like. This is a quote, and I think it was a quote from an author. You need to be drenched in words, literally soaked in them. And the funny thing about this, and because everybody points this out now, is that that's not the way you use literally, because you cannot be literally soaked in words. It's impossible. It is impossible to be soaked in words. Physically impossible. It is cosmologically impossible. I'm not even sure I'm using that word in the correct way right there. But you can't be soaked in words. But there was a writer who was like, oh, this is what makes you a writer. You have to be soaked in words, literally. I guess they're not a very good writer. They might be a very good writer. I'm not trying to be mean to other writers. I'm not trying to diss someone else's work right here. I'm just trying to express my opinion on the matter and explain why I disagree. And I've got an issue with this. It kind of rubs me the wrong way, but let's go on because I'm getting out of the way. So you got to have a love of language to be a writer. You got to have the words used. I'm just using their words, a head full of words. You like words, you have a fascination with words, an enormous vocabulary. I don't even know what enormous vocabulary is. At what point do you transition from like a regular just slobs vocabulary, like our vocabulary? That's why we have the word of the week, because we just have a regular person's vocabulary, and toward an enormous vocabulary. You must be good at writing. You must be gifted with writing. You have a wide acquaintance with different types of writing, all different genres. Now, I think that that some genres are not really. I don't really like certain genres. I'm not a particular fan of romance novels because I think they're boring. But you got to be acquainted with all different genres if you're a writer. If you are now. It says that if you must be a good writer. If you are a bad writer, you are not a writer. That's one thing. But another person said you can be good at writing, but also not be a writer. So if you're bad at writing, you cannot be a writer. If you're good at writing, you can. If you're good at writing, it does not necessarily make you a writer. And maybe you're feeling the same way I'm feeling. I'm trying to hold back my thoughts about what I think about these. I want to give commentary on this, and I'm trying not to be snarky, but it's really, really hard. So bear with me. If I get a little distracted, I have to remind myself that I've just got to get through these. So you have to be able to write despite distractions and discouragement. And it is impossible. This is a quote from a writer. It is impossible to discourage real writers. You aren't a writer if you can't take criticism. You don't worry about how to start or if you have time to actually write. You just write. You just write. You just don't worry about those things. You just go off and write. You're like, man, I'm going to get down. I'm going to write. Now, I bring these up, and you may have figured out what's going on in my mind with these. Maybe if you think like me, maybe you're agreeing with every single quote I'm presenting. In some cases, you're contradicting yourself if you're believing with every single thing, because one says that you must be good at writing. Well, I guess it's not technically contradicting yourself, but it's getting pretty close. But I bring these up, and maybe you're thinking about this, and what this kind of comes across to me as is like, it comes across as pretentious. It comes across as really pretentious, and I'm not a fan of pretentious people, and maybe I don't really think I get along with most writers. Now, I'll explain that. Not that I don't get along. I'm friendly with almost everyone. But when I come across someone who is writing something, what it always seems like to me is they have this kind of attitude towards writing. Now, what I mean by that is that they kind of see themselves, they're elitists, and I'm not a fan of that. Now, they're portraying writing as something better than another job. They're seeing writing as this really romantic thing. It's like, writing, as if you actually think about writing is a really boring thing to do. You sit down and you put words on a piece of paper, and you just sit in one spot to do it. You're not saving somebody from a fire. You're not in a battlefield. You're not even doing something. You're not flying a plane. You don't get to see stuff. You get to see your computer screen, or if you write on a piece of paper, or if you want to be really hipster, you can write on a typewriter. But you're just like sitting down and writing. Like I don't see the romance in it. It's fun. Like, I think it's fun for a lot of people. That's why a lot of people write. But I don't see it as better than other people's jobs. So, like, a lot of people, they're like, a lot of writers, a lot of people who are writing stuff about writing are like, oh, this is what makes you a real writer, quote, end quote. Now, I'm going to stop right there because I have to check this out. I'm going to get this back to you. This, the quote unquote thing, I think it's quote, end quote, because there's a front quote and a back quote. Okay, quote, end quote. Not quote unquote, but I'm going to get back to you and actually correct myself if that's not correct. But yeah, so they see it as you must be this real writer. This makes you a real writer, these different things. Or writing is not like, there's one author that said, writing is not like any other way of life. It's not like any other profession. It's a way of life. It's like, oh, writing is so special. It's an amazing thing, and I'm so glad to be a part of this exclusive club that everybody's in. There's another one. There's another person who said, writing is a sacred calling. Give me a break. Give me a break. I think writing is really, really cool. I think it's really fun, but a sacred calling? Are you serious? Like, writing is a tool we use to communicate with other people. I have ideas in my head. I'm trying to get ideas across to you, or I have a story in my head that conveys ideas or something like that, and I'm using it as a tool. Writing can be used in a horrible way, or it can be used in a way that's really, really cool. You could have a story that's an awesome story that conveys an awful message, or you could have a story that is a okay story, but it has like truths in it that connect to humanity, and it makes it a really good story. Or maybe it doesn't even make it a really good story, but what you learn from the story teaches you so much that it's worth the fact that it's not written very well. So, like, it's a sacred calling. Yeah. I don't really see it that way. It just comes across as if writers and people who are creative think they're better than other people, and I don't agree with that because I don't think they are. The fact that they can write professionally, the fact that someone can act professionally, the fact that someone can that they can make music professionally is because of people who do not do those things, who do boring jobs or do just regular jobs, who do not get fame for them or glamour. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to these different things that have been said. So they say a writer must write every day. Well, what if you are really good at writing? What if you do have a passion for writing and you can't write every day? Then you're like, oh, I guess I'm not a real writer. I guess I can't make it because I just can't. I work 2 jobs, but I just can't find the time to write. I work 2 jobs and I have 4 kids, but I just can't find the time to write. So I must not be a writer. I must not be good. I must not fit into their little club of writers. Or you must understand writing on a deeper level than the normal population. You understand the craft of writing. And to be a good writer, I would say that you need to understand the craft of writing. But to be labeled a writer, I don't think you necessarily do. You can't stop writing. It's a compulsion. It's more important than air. There's a very few things in my life that are very, this is just making me laugh. It's just so ridiculous. I read an article. I don't remember who put the article out, but it was just so, oh gosh, it was so awful. It was just so horrid. It was just explaining and describing writing in such these metaphorical terms that are just like, are you kidding me? You can't be serious that you view it like this. It's just so romanticized. It's just so romanticized, and all you're doing is you're sitting behind a computer screen typing words on a stinking on the computer. You're just typing words into Word or into whatever word processing thing you use. So it just makes me laugh. Like the fact it just goes so far beyond things, and I think that's kind of how I'm beginning to view writing. It's just like it's funny when people glamorize something that you're an entertainer. If you write books, you're an entertainer. You're not someone who you may not be. There's few people in the world who are just like, you listen to them talk and you're like, man, they've got a lot of good things to say. There's people who are like that, but it's a lot of writers. They say things. You're like, okay, yeah, like I could totally write that in a book, and that's kind of how I feel. And maybe that's why I don't necessarily find books as appealing right now, because I run into books and I read a book and I'm just like, yeah, like. It was an alright book. It was entertaining, like it was fun, but it's not like it just blew my mind. And a lot of people run into books, they're like, it blew my mind. And I guess I'm being a little pretentious right now in terms of books. I'm a book snob because I want a book to be really good, because I think that if someone writes a book and they take years to do it, they should make it as good as possible. I'm even more of like, for movies should all be phenomenal. I should just be floored for every single movie. But talking about writing this way, it's just like, really, really, like you're not that profound. You're not, and every single author, I've never read an author that I'm like, whoa, they're really, really profound. Now I've heard people who are like professors, or people who are not necessarily professors, who are just like regular people who just think really deeply about something, and then they say something, I'm like, whoa, that was really profound. But they're not fiction writers, and it's just really funny. I just think that talking about it in this way is making it out to be something it isn't. Now, I think you should be good at writing if you want to write. The funny thing is that you can be good at writing but not be a writer. So you can actually be really good at writing, but you're not necessarily a writer if you don't fit into this criteria this person's outlining. Now, this person, it's multiple people that said this. So the ability, you write despite discouragement, and I think this is a good thing, but it says impossible to discourage real writers. And it's just like, are you serious? Like, are you not a human being? Are you just like, are you so confident in your own writing and your own ability to do something? You can't be discouraged. I'm sorry. This is just, I think this is really funny. I don't know why. It's just like, it's just so extreme that it just makes me laugh. You aren't a writer if you can't take criticism. Well, what if you're like a beginning writer? What if you're just starting out and you just have a really hard time with criticism? What if you're a really, really good writer, but you just like you just have a really hard time with criticism? You just are so self-conscious, and you just have to overcome that thing. I don't really see this as part of your writing. I just see this as part of your personality. Like, they're trying to build up this personality around a writer. They're like, I must fit into this personality to be a writer. But the next thing is you don't worry about where to start or when to write, or like the time you have to write. And I talked about that before with writing every day, but don't worry where to start. Now, when I write, I plan out a lot of stuff, and I do worry where I'm starting, and I do figure out how I'm starting the book, because I think that within the planning process, there's multiple different things going on when you write. It's not just one thing. I have to figure out like what's going on with my plot. I have to figure out how to say it the best way I can. Now, I'm still trying to figure out how to say it the best way I can, but I also want to figure out the best plot possible. I want to figure out the best story. I want a story that really gets people, and they're like, whoa, that's an awesome story. And I don't feel like I can do that if I'm doing my writing and figuring it out at the same time, because I have to have part of my attention toward writing, and I have to have part of my attention toward plot. And there's other aspects as well. I'm not getting into that right now. But when I write, I do concern myself with where to start. I do take a lot of thought and think about where to start. But I guess, I'm just starting to think that I may just not consider myself a writer. I'm just going to say, hey, I write stuff. I may just do that if I don't fit into that picture of writing. What I think these things do is I think they discourage people from writing books if they want to write a book. And I do not think you should discourage people from doing something if they want to do it, especially if it's something hard. Like I was talking about, I don't know which episode it was, but I was talking about pain in somebody's life, that I think pain is important. I think pain is a good thing. If you can overcome that pain, you can change your attitude toward that pain. You can see it, okay, I can get through this. It strengthens you as a person. And writing a book is a tough thing because you have no idea what's going to happen with it. And it takes so long and it takes dedication that I think it's actually good for you to write a book. There are several writers that I've heard that said, if you want to write a book, you shouldn't because there are already too many crappy books in the market. And I think that's just so rude. I think it's like, well, if the person wants to write a book, let them bloody write a book because they'll write a book if they want to, whether or not they want to do it. And I think it just discouraging something from doing something like that, that's just a really big undertaking. Now, it's their own time. If they want to waste their time writing a book, or it's not a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. I misspoke there. If they want to take their time and write a book, they can. And it's not a waste of time because even if they don't get it published, there's still something happening in them. They're certainly learning something about themselves, and they're learning about something new, and they're expanding how they view the world because they're writing a book. So let them write a book. Don't discourage somebody from writing a book. And all these things do it because they create this picture of what a perfect writer should be, and there's no perfect writer. There's not this like perfect formula that makes a writer. It's just a person who writes is a writer, and that's how I'm going to leave it. So my definition of a writer is: do you write? And if the answer to that is yes, then you're a writer. Now, if you are a professional writer, you write full time. That is your job. You may not be making money making money on writing at the time, but if you are doing it as your job, that is the bulk of your time is spent writing. So you're doing pretty much 40 hours a week of writing. That is your job, and you're doing it as a full-time writer. You may not be good at writing as a professional writer. You may be making money and not be good at writing, but I would still consider you a writer. If you do not write for money or full-time, you are an amateur writer. That is what I would consider myself. I do not think that you have to fit into this perfect picture of what a writer is. So there's a couple more quotes. And these are my favorite about writing. And these are the ones I disagree with, and I'm probably going to laugh again because I think all these are really funny. The act of writing is an extension of thought. It's like, yep, that's right. The act of writing is an extension of thought. Actually, the act of writing is putting thoughts on paper. So yeah, I guess like you're trying to be profound. I'm being mean. I'm sorry I'm being mean, but like it's just like evident. It's just evident to me that yeah, the act of writing is an extension. We wouldn't be writing if we weren't thinking. We're trying to put thoughts on paper. It's connected to thought. We get that. And then the best part about this, the best quote I found is, writing words on a piece of paper does not mean writing has taken place. I'll read that one more time for you just so you can soak that in. Writing words on a piece of paper does not mean writing has taken place. Isn't that profound? Doesn't that come across as so smug? And I may be coming across as a complete jerk when I'm talking about this. I do think it's funny, and I used to just get irked at it. I'm just like, no, like just let somebody write. This is the reason why I made this podcast, is because there's so many writers out there. There's so many people who write. There's so many professional writers and amateur writers, or people who like post stuff online and different things like that. And there's so many of them that have this attitude towards writing. That writing, that you have to fit into this specific mold. You have to be transcendent. You have to be this great thinker. You have to be so profound to be a writer. And you have to have like an IQ of 183 to be a writer. And how I view it is you don't. And this podcast, the reason why I made this podcast is because of how people answer questions like this, because I don't want to talk about how you have to fit into a specific formula for writing, and I don't want to talk about how you have to fit into this perfect little box of how somebody sees you as a writer, or like you don't have to fit into their like someone, if they say, oh, you have to be, I have to get my list out again, I'm sorry. You have to write every single day. You must, you and the regular person, you can't stop writing. You have this compulsion inside of you. You are drenched in words. You have to fit all this criteria to be a writer. And what I say is just no, you don't. You do not have to fit all that criteria to be a writer. Do you write? If the answer is yes, you're a writer. And I do this because I think that some people think that you have to be this great wordsmith to be a writer. And the truth is that you just have to have something to say. And I think that everyone has something to say. There's every person every person I know can write a book. And that book can be valuable to other people because it's coming from a human being. It's coming from a human being. And you do not need to be this great thinker to write a book and actually affect somebody's life. Because if you think about your own life, the people who affected your life are likely not these superstars, likely not these huge thinkers. They're probably just regular people. And if those regular people in your life can have such an impact, why would their thoughts not have such an impact on your life as well? Like they're already talking to you. They're already sharing their thoughts with you. Well, what if they took the time to really think about what different things in life, and they tried to think from their perspective, and then they shared it with you? And that's why I think that if you want to write a book, write a book. Try to do it the best you're able to. Write that book be really hard on yourself. But don't let other people be like, oh, well, this book sucks, because be really hard on yourself, take critiques, allow yourself to grow through the process, because I think it's going to be really good for you. I think that it's a really good thing to write a book because it just allows you to see yourself in a different way, and it forces you to do things that you don't want to do. It forces you to go into situations that you don't want to go into. For me, with writing a book, I gave it to people to read, and I got some feedback that is like, okay, like it's telling me stuff I don't like about the book, and I have to grow, and I have to be willing to take that feedback. And I just think it's a really good thing to try to do. So if you want to do it, go for it. Like, why would somebody discourage? Why would if somebody said, if there was someone who was a runner, and someone said, I want to run a marathon, people who run marathons would not say, well, if you want to run a marathon, you should not run a marathon because there's already too many people running a marathon. There's not another profession that I know. There are certainly really stupid people in different areas, but there's not another area that's like somebody shooting for a goal that people in that area I think people in that area are like, oh, well, don't do it because there's too many of this. It's really creative people. Because if you're someone who is overweight, or if you're just out of shape, and you're saying, oh, I want to get into shape. I want to actually have these goals. I want to be able to lift this much. I want to be able to run this far. I want to have a really good I want to have really good cardio so I can just run and run and run. Those people in that area, from what I know, my experience is that they are like, yeah, you can do this. It's only in these creative fields that I think that people are like, no, you shouldn't do it because there's already too much crap. Just let people do it, because the people who are saying there's already too much crap, the books that I've seen, the people who have written, I think your stuff is crap. I don't like your stuff, and that's just me. Like, I'm allowed not to like somebody's things, but I don't. I generally, if I read it, I'm like, yeah, like it's okay. But that's my opinion. Somebody else probably thinks they're the best thing in the world, and that's okay. That's my viewpoint on it. Again, that is the reason why I made this, to just have a different viewpoint on it, and to try to see writing as more philosophical, of course, but also not see writing as this thing that no one can take a part in, that you have to be in the special club. You have to meet this criteria. You have to essentially be like a divine. You have to be divine. Stop being so pretentious, creative people, because you don't. We're going to go to the logical fallacy. The logical fallacy is the argument to moderation, and I think that this is a good one to remember in terms of politics, and it is assuming that the compromise between two positions is always correct. So again, it is the argument to moderation, assuming the compromise between two positions is always correct. So in the United States, we have two political parties, and they are split on a lot of issues. And if you decide to be in the middle of the issues, because it is the middle, you're saying, oh, if I'm in the center, I must be right. You are committing a logical fallacy. I think this one is really good to remember because I think a lot of people I meet, they're like, well, I'm center. I'm more of the center aisle. It's like, when I think about that, I'm like, well, you're just center because it's center. You're not center because you have any ideas. You just say, well, I must be doing the same thing. If I'm in between two people arguing, I must be the same person. But just because you're not a person arguing, just because you're not arguing about an issue doesn't mean you're the same person. And it doesn't even mean you're the logical person. The center may be correct, but it is not the fact that it is in the center that makes it correct. It is that the facts line up with it and the argument lines up with it. It's the fact that reality actually reflects it. So if you are in the center, if you're one of those people who just chooses to be there because you want to avoid the political debate, you're committing a logical fallacy and stop it, okay? Actually think about what you believe. Actually think if it is actually correct before you say that you're in that area. That is what I'm going to leave you with that week. This is How to Write Good. If you do enjoy this podcast, please like and share on Facebook. It does not seem like something that would be helpful, but it is something that is very helpful because it gets the word out about it. If you have somebody you know that may enjoy this podcast, then they may see that you liked or shared it and they're like, hey, I'll check it out. And then they like and share it and so on and so forth. And if you don't like it, just you can just forget I exist and you can check out Public House Media. See that segue there? You can check out Public House Media if you do not like this podcast because there's bound to be something you do like. Now, if you do like this podcast, there's even more of a reason why you need to check out Public House Media because you're bound to find something that you do like or something that's better. Because if you like this podcast, your standards are really low and you need to bring them up. You need to find something better. You can find that at Public House Media. I am Daniel Poppie. This is How to Write Good. I will see you next week. I won't see you next week, but you'll hear me next week. If you do have a book to write, if you want to do something big in your life, just try it because the worst that can happen is failure and you can just start again. That's how I see it. Go for it. Happy Thanksgiving.